Hello, I'm Patrick O'Hare, President of the Friends of Ludington State Park. The Friends is a 30-year-old 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide and support programming and projects at the Ludington State Park. Thank you for taking the time to watch our Zoom recording of Peter Manting's history of the Big Sable Lighthouse. We hope you will also take the time to explore the Friends website and consider becoming a member. You can also find information on the website regarding past, current, and planned projects, future events, volunteer and donation opportunities, prior news, or you can register to receive our e-newsletters. On behalf of the Friends Group, we hope you enjoyed Peter's presentation. And now I will turn it over to him.
Well, good evening. My name is Peter Manting. I'm the Executive Director of the Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association, and our mission is to preserve, promote, and educate the public, and to make our lighthouses accessible to all. Our association cares for 4 wonderful lighthouses that grace the eastern shores of Lake Michigan, starting with the White River Light Station and Museum located in Whitehall, Michigan, moving north to Silver Lake, which is home of the Little Point Sable Lighthouse, then to Ludington, in which we care for both the Ludington North Breakwater Lighthouse and the Big Sable Point Lighthouse. Our association is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, which is member-based and with a board of directors and a very small staff. SPLKA doesn't own the lighthouses, but we have lease or management agreements with all 4 properties. SPLKA is responsible for all of the preservation efforts, maintenance, and upkeep of all the lights. And we as an organization host over 420 member/volunteers who come each summer for 2 or for 1 week from over 42 states to make sure that we're able to meet the part of our mission to keep our lighthouses open for the general public. This evening, we're going to take a larger look, and that's why you're here, at the Big Sable Point Lighthouse. For nearly 100 years, people lived here. Lighthouse keepers built buildings, raised children, played games, made music, planted gardens, and gathered eggs from their chickens. Here, in the shadow of this 112-foot structure, weather shaped the work of family life in this desolate place. Guy Blake, a turn-of-the-century lighthouse keeper, wrote on March 4th, 1903, "Couldn't see anything of the lake, nothing but ice and snow as far as the eye can reach." His journal gives us an inside look at the life under the light. It was an extraordinary life, living at the water's edge, keeping the light visible about 18 miles out into Lake Michigan, a land signal to travelers of magnificent but sometimes treacherous waters. Big Sable Point Lighthouse was built in 1867, originally named Grand Point a Sable Light. The name was used on most official records, but occasionally other names were used, such as Grand Point a Sable or the Grand Point or the Grand Sable Point. The Lighthouse Board officially changed the name to the Big Sable Point Light Station on April 30th, 1910. The current government charts listed as the Big Sable Light, and the word sable is French meaning sand, and the original name means Great Sand Point. In 1948, the merchant schooner Neptune sank just off from Big Sable Point with a loss of 37 lives and more than $35,000 of cargo intended for logging camps. The loss of life in the rapidly growing logging industry in the area caused local officials to begin requesting lighthouse at Big Sable Point. In 1855, 12 ships wrecked between Big Sable Point and Ludington, some 9 miles to the south, taking 48 lives. This stirred action, and on August 18, 1856, Congress appropriated $6,000 for the building of a light at Big Sable Point. Land for the Grand Point Sable Light Station was acquired through 2 different presidential actions. One on June 4th, 1856, when President Franklin Pierce reserved 1 parcel of land, and then on May 28, 1858, President James Buchanan reserved a 2nd parcel. In 1858, a survey of the property was completed, but before the lighthouse could be planned and erected, the Civil War intervened, and the Lighthouse Board took no further action until 1865. In 1866, Congress reacted to the request by the Lighthouse Board for a light station by appropriating $35,000 for a new lighthouse at Big Sable Point. On October 16th, 1866, a final parcel of land was added by order of President Andrew Johnson, and the final lighthouse site consisted of 933 acres deeded from the state of Michigan to the United States at no cost. Construction began in early 1867 and continued throughout the year. The area near the proposed light station was desolate, with almost no access from land side. The nearest roads were 9 miles away. The lack of land access made it necessary to bring by barge all construction materials and most workers in from Lake Michigan. While there were a few workers from the nearby area, most were supplied by the Lighthouse Service and the Army Corps of Engineers coming in from industrialized areas like Detroit, the southern tip of Lake Michigan, and Milwaukee. First priority involved building a small dock for unloading the construction supplies, and the immediate construction of a temporary building for storage of supplies and for the housing of the construction workers. The temporary building was left at the site and later used as a barn. With these tasks complete, construction began on the excavations for the foundation of the light station, tower, keeper's dwelling, storage building, and privy. The light station tower was built 500 feet from the shoreline and consisted of multiple layers of rather soft Milwaukee cream brick. Its walls are over 5 feet thick at the bottom, tapering to over 2 feet thick at the top. About every sixth row of bricks is placed from the long side of the brick into the wall to help connect the various layers of the brick within the wall. The tower is 100 feet tall to the focal plane of the Fresnel lens. The focal plane of the Fresnel lens is 106 feet above the level of the lake water, and the tower is 112 feet tall overall to the top of the ventilator ball of the top of the lantern room. Inside the tower is a spiral staircase of cast iron steps in a filigree pattern, ascending to the top of the tower. Along the way up the steps, there are 4 landings and 3 rooms. The lowest room, sometimes called the service room, consisted of an enlarged area with a storage cabinet and window to the outside. Next comes the watch room and then the lantern room. At the top of the tower, there is a gallery walkway with a railing around the watch room. And there's an additional work walkway with railing directly above it, above the lantern room. And you can see that. You can see Dave Carpin from the Coast Guard is on the lower one, and then you see the one up above there. The keepers use this uppermost walkway when cleaning the lantern room windows. The tower has windows located adjacent to the stairs on the inside of the tower. Near the top of the service room level are more windows, and all inside window sills and lintels are made of cut stone. All the rooms have a floor made of steel, partly embedded in the brickwork and resting on cast iron gridders, with a trapdoor for the access to the tower stairs. The service room has a wooden cabinet with 2 doors partially built into the wall, where spare lamp chimneys, wicks, and other supplies are stored. The service room also included a wood-burning stove so that the keepers could keep warm during the cold winter evenings. As the tower was being completed in August 1867, the district engineer requested the district lampas be sent to the station to install the new Fresnel lens and lamp. When the Big Sable Point Lighthouse was first planned in 1856, it was determined to be a rather unimportant light, so a 4th order lens was ordered for the tower. When the lighthouse was delayed due to the Civil War, the 4th order lens intended for Big Sable was used for another lighthouse. And when it was finally built in 1867, Big Sable was now designated a major lake coast light, using an oil lamp and a 3rd order Fresnel lens. The Fresnel lens did not rotate, but produced a fixed disc of light, and that light could be seen for about 18 miles out into Lake Michigan. Installation on the lens was completed, and on November 1st, 1867, the 3rd order lens, consisting of a number of glass prisms and lenses set in a bronze frame, was lit for the first time. The external size of the 3rd order lens is about 5¼ feet tall and 3½ feet in diameter. and the firm Sauder and Company of Paris, France, made the magnificent lens. The keeper's house was built of standard wood construction and then seethed in the same soft yellow brick used in the tower. It was a 1.5-story house with basement storage area, and the keeper lived on the first floor and the assistant keeper lived on the second floor. No utilities such as gas, electricity, indoor plumbing, or an access road at this point. Between the keeper's house and the light station tower was a covered walkway that had doors into the tower, the house, and the outside. The walkway allowed the keepers to access the tower without going outside in the winter or during storms. The original storage location for the oil for the tower oil lamp was in the northwest room of the keeper's dwelling, which is right here. You see, here's the tunnel to the tower, and then this is the room where the oil was stored. Lard oil is not volatile, and it's hard to ignite, especially in the winter, when it often had to be heated on a stove before it could be used. Although the storage room was next to the tower walkway, and it made it easier for the keeper and his assistants, it's still hard to imagine storing hundreds of gallons of fuel oil inside of your home. Cooking and heating were accomplished by using stoves fired with driftwood gathered from the local area. Later, coal became available for heating the house, and coal was brought in on the Lighthouse tender ships that periodically visited the light station. The coal was hauled from the tender by rowboat, rolled across the sand in a wheelbarrow on a wooden plank walkway, and then slid down a metal chute into the basement of the house. Later, they had a separate storage coal shed that they were able to put the coal in. Oil lamps were used for lighting inside the house for many years, but finally replaced by electric lights in 1949. Water came from the pumped well located on the east side of the dwelling near the keeper's back entry door. The roof of the keeper's dwelling was designed with special gutters and downspouts. The gutters collected rainwater while the downspouts carried the water down into the basement, where a cistern stored the water for future use. The system was designed as an emergency backup supply for the well, and the water from the cistern was used for washing. The downspouts could be directed either into the basement cistern or to the outside ground. The keeper controlled a sliding valve panel that was used to direct the flow of the water. And when it rained, the keeper would set the valve so the water would be directed outside on the ground. After several minutes had passed and the dirt and debris were washed from the roof, gutters, and downspouts, the keeper would then set the valve panel to direct the flow, now clean water, down into the cistern in the basement. Minor repairs were made from 1869 to 1898, but by 1898, the district inspector reported that the tower was in poor condition. The soft Milwaukee cream brick were deteriorating from being sandblasted out on the windy point. Metal cladding was fabricated and completely erected in the shops of the Lighthouse Depot over in Milwaukee. In the spring of 1900, the 18 metal cylinder panels were disassembled and shipped over to Big Sable Point for installation around the Big Sable Point Tower. The space between the tower and the metal was filled in by cement, and the windows in the tower were replaced with metal portholes installed in the metal cladding. The tower was then painted white with a large black band so sailors could see the tower. Many had complained that they couldn't see Big Sable during the day as the yellow bricks were the color of sand and the tower had blended into the background. With the new paint job, its new day mark became the black and white striped tower on Lake Michigan. In 1909, a fog signal building was built on the property closer to the shoreline. Because of the complexity of the new steam generator fog signal, the Lighthouse Board authorized an additional keeper to be assigned to Big Sable Point Light Station. So the house needed to be expanded. And by 1913, a brick oil house, a new barn, and the remodeling of the keeper's quarters were all complete. Time and innovation gradually changed life at the Lighthouse. In 1924, telephones arrived. In 1933, the road to Big Sable through the dunes was built. In 1939, the Lighthouse service was abolished and taken over by the Coast Guard. And all former Lighthouse service personnel were given the choice by the U.S. Coast Guard to remain under the Coast Guard as civilians or to enlist in the Coast Guard. In 1941, a smaller fog signal building built on a steel tower was built to replace the old fog signal building and oil house that was washing into Lake Michigan. In an effort to protect this and the Big Sable property, the first seawall was also installed. In 1942, a bottled gas stove was installed in each of the keepers' apartments. In 1948, the plumbing was brought inside. In 1949, a diesel generator replaced the need for oil lamps. And in 1953, the entire station was powered electrically through underground commercial lines. The keeper's hands lighting the oil lamp were no longer needed. In 1968, the light became automated, and the last civilian lighthouse service keepers, Homer Merventon, retired and left Big Sable. In April 1970, the fog signal building was discontinued, and all Coast Guard personnel were transferred out of the station. Then the station was officially closed. The light to this day is still maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard's Aids to Navigation team. Later in 1970, the boarded up lighthouse was signed over by the U.S. Coast Guard to the state DNR. Not knowing what to do with it, the DNR subleased the lighthouse in 1972 to the Foundation for Behavioral Research. In 1973, the Behavioral Foundation began a general cleanup and repair of the facility. And in 1974, the foundation left the property and the state of Michigan resumed control of the lease. In 1977, a large winter storm destroyed about 100 feet of the existing seawall. And then in 1982, heavy storms, both in April and November, occurred in the area, causing significant beach erosion, especially near Big Sable Point. The high seas of an April storm caused the machinery building near the lighthouse to collapse. Fortunately, the machinery building was no longer being used. It was after this destruction that the Coast Guard began looking into options to either protect the light in the tower or to close down the station and to replace it. The lighthouse had been built 500 feet from the shoreline. In 1909, the distance had been reduced to 385 feet. In 1975, and then in 1986, the lake got as close as 4 feet from the tower. The Coast Guard made the decision to let the tower wash in and installed a new steel tower south of the lighthouse on top of the large dune. This was to be electrified once Big Sable's tower started to collapse into the lake. The absence of constant hands at work led to the sad decline of the keeper's dwelling, and vandalism became the work of other hands. Erosion and high water in 1986 threatened the tower and other buildings in what was to become of the Big Sable Point Lighthouse. In the winter of 1985, the state of Michigan finally gave up its license, citing vandalism and liability, and gave control back to the Coast Guard. In 1986, the Coast Guard solicited bids for the use of the lighthouse property. A number of organizations made proposals, and the Foundation for Behavioral Research was selected by the Coast Guard to receive the lease. A Coast Guard spokesman said, "We looked long and hard at all the proposals made by the interested party, and the foundation was selected on its strength of its organization and their plans for restoration. The group has a well-established track record, having previously restored the Big Sable Light in 1973. They have a documented ability, a sound plan, and organization, as well as financial support. The foundation began by trying to restore the inside of the dwelling using their own funding. Later, a federal grant was obtained to help restore the tower. In 1987, a group of caring local citizens also formed the Big Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association. They were upset to learn that the Coast Guard had given up on the tower and installed a metal tower in the dune. Working in conjunction with the Foundation of Behavioral Research, they undertook major erosion control project in 1987, 1988. They constructed a seawall, added riprap stonework, that now maintains an area of 550 feet in front of the lighthouse. And you can see they were building the seawall here in 2012. We added onto the seawall another 150-foot extension to the north side of the light as well. You can see, the lake wasn't even, at this point, the lake wasn't even up to the break or to the seawall. So, and when they installed it. So in 1990, the Institute for Behavioral Research turned the lease over to Big Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association. It was interesting. I found a letter dated from the head of the Behavioral Institute of Research, and it was to the federal government and to the Coast Guard. And it said something that we have not been able to do, something that the government has not been able to do, and something that the state government has not been able to do, but this group of local citizens from Ludington has been able to save the Big Sable Point Lighthouse. And it is with my recommendation that they take over the lease. And so in 1990, the Big Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association was given that lease. So in 1996, the Coast Guard brought in a helicopter and they removed the steel tower from the dune, much to the cheering of many of our members. In 2002, the Coast Guard declared the Big Sable Point Lighthouse properties excess properties, and they were transferred over to the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan has complete ownership of the Big Sable Point Lighthouse, but shortly after that, Big Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association, which is now known as the Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association, signed a 25-year lease to maintain and operate the Big Sable Point Lighthouse. One of the favorite parts of my job include hearing the stories being retold about what life was like at the lighthouse. In some aspects, it was a hard life. In other aspects, what an adventure to grow up at the light. As I told you, keeper light at the lighthouse was pretty isolated. Based on the keeper's logs, the light was originally closed for the winter, about mid-December, each year reopening sometime during the first 2 weeks of April, when the ice broke up on Lake Michigan. Well, that only lasted at Big Sable until 1878, when the light became operational year-round. In the beginning, it only took 2 keepers were needed to maintain the light. The keeper and his assistant each generally worked 12-hour shifts, noon to midnight and midnight to noon. The shifts were alternated between 2 men every day, the 2 men every few days. And later, after the fog signal was installed, it took the keeper and 2 assistants to keep the light station in operation. At this time, the keeper and his assistants each stood 6-hour watches. The light and fog signal were maintained around the clock, 7 days a week. The keeper and his assistants were jacks of all trades. They were often required to act as plumbers and carpenters and masons. They repaired the lamps, fog signal, and other machinery, except when major problems needed outside help. They also hunted and fished and maintained a small garden to supplement their food supplies. Supplies came in by lighthouse tender ship, including books that were brought in about every 3 months. Ludington was the closest town, and that was 9 miles away via the beach. And it wasn't until around about 1900 that they even started driving wagons on the beach to bring supplies out to the lighthouse. Spring activities were pretty standard: cleaning and polishing the lenses and lamp, cleaning the lantern room windows, lots of painting and whitewashing of the buildings, getting everything ready for inspection. One granddaughter remembers that her grandfather had many brass tools which he kept polished and stored away. And when they spotted the lighthouse tender ship with the inspector off in the distance headed to Big Sable, her grandfather would have her and her siblings get those tools out and put the everyday ones in storage so the inspector only saw the nice shiny brass tools when he arrived. Grandma would immediately start baking, and Grandpa would put on his uniform so that things looked wonderful when the inspector arrived. The daily routine of the lightkeeper wasn't difficult or demanding. Often it was tedious and boring. The light had to be maintained in a constant state of readiness. The keepers had a manual called Instructions to Light Keepers. In this manual, it said the main responsibility of the keeper was to keep the lamp burning from sunset to sunrise. In addition, they had to clean and polish the lens, check and fill the oil lamp, dust the framework of the light, and trim the wicks. If the light had an assistant keeper, it was his job to clean the brass and copper fixtures of the light lens and all the tools in the lantern room, as well as the walls, floors, and balconies. He was to sweep the tower stairs, landings, doors, windows, recesses, passages from the lantern room to the oil room. So life could be rather isolated as well. With little to do but hunt, fish, read, and here we're swimming, it looks like. But the hardest problem for the keepers' families was not physical or social. It was the social isolation. It was the annoying sound of the fog signal when it was in operation. The keepers got used to the noise because they had to, but the wives and children complained more about the fog signal operation than anything else at the light station. It was hard to hold a conversation, read a book, or sleep when the signal was in operation. And at Big Sable, it was often in operation for several days and nights at a time. Les Mervington, son of one of the keepers, recalls that one day the Coast Guard called to see if the signal was on. He had to put the phone down and listen, and actually found out it was on. So apparently some of the kids did get used to it. The first keeper at Big Sable was Alonzo Hyde Sr. Alonzo had settled on a farm in Mears, Michigan during the Civil War. He held several tent revival meetings all over the state of Michigan, recruiting men for military service for the Civil War efforts. Congress appointed him the first keeper of Big Sable. It was his reward for his service to his country during the Civil War. He served there for 2 years with his son as assistant keeper. His son was Alfonso Hyde Jr., and when he became head keeper, he had the Lighthouse service appoint his wife as assistant so his family could have the whole residence. Several years later, Keeper Burr Coswell, who's very famous around this area, he also had his wife appointed as the assistant as well, so that they could have the house too. In the early days, it was not unusual for Native American men in winter hunting parties to stop at the lighthouse to sleep in front of the fireplace, often sharing their bounty with the keeper and his family. The wife of Keeper Newton Bird taught a number of Native American women to sew using cloth purchased at the general store located by the sawmill. One day, a young girl proudly came to the lighthouse with her own handmade apron over her arm. The girl had copied the pattern and the colors of Mrs. Bird's apron down to the patches Mrs. Bird had sewn on her own apron to repair the holes in it. In the early 1870s, Keeper Newton Bird and his son went into the village of Lincoln, which was located just a few miles south of the lighthouse. This was during the early spring in a sled pulled by a team of horses. They traveled across Hamlin Lake along the riverbank, and after they bought their supplies, they were returning when met by 2 Native American men coming from the direction of the lighthouse. The men had come to warn them that the spring thaw had started and that there were large cracks beginning in the ice, making the return trip home along the same route very dangerous. Keeper Bird claims this warning probably saved his and his son's life. Guy Blake, he's the gentleman back in the back row on the left-hand side with a floppy hat. He was an assistant keeper at Big Sable Point Lighthouse from 1901 to 1905. He was a very resourceful young man. He served under his brother George, who was the head keeper from 1899 to 1905. Guy had a wonderful look at daily life, or he provided us, with a wonderful look at daily life at Big Sable, as he kept a daily journal, which we still have today. Guy used to ride his bike on what was a sandy path into town to court his wife before they were married. According to Guy, it was a long, hard ride, but it sure was worth it to be with his girlfriend. Guy's first child, a girl, was born weighing only 2 pounds. Her foot was so small that it fit through Cornelia's, that's Guy's wife's, wedding ring. Being so isolated, they were not able to call for a doctor, and so Guy helped deliver the baby. Guy took a shoebox, he wrapped the baby up, and he put a light over her. He knew how to keep chicks alive, and it also worked for his daughter. His second child didn't come as fast. Guy's wife was not feeling well on the day of the birth. He carried his wife into the living area room, made her comfortable by the potbelly stove, and then he left to fetch the lady who was going to help his wife with the birth. Guy returned with the midwife, and all went well. And he wrote in his diary that day, "Cornice and baby doing first rate." It was a very cold day. His granddaughter remembers her grandfather, Guy, wearing high-top, laced-up black boots, and so did her Uncle George when working at the Lighthouse. She said she remembers them always being shiny and clean when they were at the Lighthouse. And even though many years had passed, as she was going through her grandfather's belongings after he had passed, she found the shoes in the back of the closet, and they were still shiny and clean and in good condition. Originally from Kansas, Guy moved his family to California after working at the Lighthouse. He worked at gold mines, and he was an inventor. He held over 110 patents on different inventions that he had worked on. And he worked on many different projects out in the California area. Henry Albert Anderson was born in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. He was Norwegian descent, and he soon gained a great love for the sea. He became a sailor, first serving on a tugboat in Lake Erie. His first year in the Lighthouse service, he was on a lightship stationed outside of the Chicago Channel. Leaving that position, he became the head keeper at Big Sable Point in 1910. He met his wife in Ludington. They had their first child at the Lighthouse. The doctor couldn't make the trip to the Lighthouse for the delivery, and so therefore Henry had to deliver the baby. The doctor arrives 3 days after the birth to find a new healthy baby boy who had taken up residence at the Light. Lou Venanter was assistant keeper from 1912 to 1923, and then head keeper from 1923 to 1936 at Big Sable. His niece, Dorothy Anderson, has wonderful memories of visiting her aunt and uncle at the Light Station. She said she spent every summer from age 8 to 16 helping out her aunt. Her memories included cleaning the lighthouse by sweeping the steps of sand and quickly removing all quilting material from the living area when the inspector was due from the Coast Guard. She and her brother lived in Ludington, and they would walk to the Coast Guard station, which is now the Maritime Museum. The Coast Guard would call out to the Light, and her uncle would come for her and her brother in a boat and take them to Big Sable. She remembers walking into town with her aunt, which was a 17-mile road trip because her aunt got sick riding in the boat, so her aunt preferred to walk to town. She remembers the Lighthouse tender bringing supplies to the Lighthouse. It couldn't get close enough to the shore, so it would blast its horn, and her Uncle Lou would row the boat out to the tender and bring the supplies back to the Light. She remembers her aunt's garden with the best white radishes she had ever eaten were grown in that garden. And she also remembers when the Civilian Conservation Corps came to build the road through the dunes and to build the state park. Her job was also to put the flag up and down each day when she was there. And she said her best memories were the times when she got to the tower, got to go to the tower for the midnight watch with her uncle. They would pass the time away playing cards. Her uncle would send her up to the next level to check the light. He'd switch the cards, basically cheating at the card game so that he was winning when she came back. Another niece, Annie Fearson, remembers her Uncle Lou's Model T Ford with the big balloon tires on it. It was so it could go through the sand like a dune buggy. She does remember being with Uncle Lou when he got it stuck and they had to carry the supplies from the car to the lighthouse that day. She remembers her uncle and other men, keepers, were constantly painting to make sure that everything looked fresh and clean. Head keeper Gordon Guy was the only keeper on record to have died during living at the lighthouse. He unfortunately had a heart attack while he was painting the landing in the keeper's quarters in 1949. Bill Hilbert had wonderful memories of his grandfather, George Rogan, who was a lighthouse keeper from 1936 to 1949. George had immigrated to the U.S. when he was 17 years old and his wife was 14. Bill's fondest memories of the lighthouse occurred during summer vacations. There was no indoor plumbing. We had a hand pump for the cistern located on the south side of the house. We had to wash dishes, and we washed our dishes with it and did our laundry with it. The keepers had a dog house for Teddy the dog, and they also had a pet crow. Bill recalls as a child, the first time I stayed here, it was a very foggy evening, and not one of us had any sleep that whole night because of the foghorn. His grandfather was the first keeper to put a mirror in the tree outside of the bedroom window so that he could look up, make sure the light was on. This was so he didn't have to sit up in the watchtower while he was on duty. His most vivid memory was in the early evening when we would fill 2-gallon brass containers with kerosene and carry it up 130 steps. Pour the kerosene into the pressurized container so we could pump it into the light. And the 2 gallons usually lasted all night. Dave Saucers was stationed at Big Sable from 1942 to 1954. And he was head keeper from 49 to 54. Dave had also served in the life-saving service and had been stationed about a mile south of Big Sable in 1914 to 1918. His wife was interviewed by the Ludington paper in 1954, and she said she would not trade today at the lighthouse for the perceived good old days when she was stationed at the life-serving station, and there was no road from the lighthouse or the station into town. Richard Swayze was second assistant keeper from 1949 to 1953. Rich said he worked at the shoreline of Lake Huron and Lake Superior, putting a lot of lighthouse keepers out of work. A master electrician, his job was to convert the lighthouses from kerosene to electric operation. The Coast Guard could then maintain the lights without keepers after his job was done. His job at Big Sable was no different, and he was there to help Big Sable make the switch. June, his wife, remembers when they first came to the lighthouse, she thought she would never get a good night's sleep because of the foghorn would blow, and June would shiver with vibration. But soon after she arrived, June did get a good night's sleep and eventually didn't hear the foghorn during the evening hours. Just blended into the background. June also said there was seldom snow around the lighthouse. It seemed to always blow over into the dunes. She did remember one evening returning from a movie in Ludington. They got partway to the lighthouse and the snow was so deep they could hardly pry the doors to the car open. They ended up walking to the lighthouse. In the morning, they sought help, and when they returned to their car, all the snow had blown away and the ground was bare, and they were embarrassed that they had asked for help. Les Mervington recalls growing up at the lighthouse. His father, Homer, was the lifetime lighthouse keeper, and they'd been stationed at other lighthouses before Big Sable. And his dad was the last assistant and then last head keeper from 1965 to 1968. As I said, Les had lived at 3 other lighthouses before moving to Big Sable. He loved Big Sable because he said, "You must remember there were always 3 families living there in the lighthouse, so there were always kids to play with." He remembers vividly doing a lot of skiing and ice skating in the winter months around Big Sable. He also remembers the road to the light was impassable many times due to blowing sand. Les said he was kind of a loner when he was growing up, so he spent a lot of his days hiking the dunes and enjoying nature when he lived out at the light. Henry Varvina was the head keeper from Big Sable from 1954 to 1965. He had been an assistant and then a head keeper at Little Sable Point until they closed the light in 1954. He was then transferred with his family to Big Sable. Lots of stories about Henry. He was also a lifetime lighthouse service person, and he served with Homer, and Homer was as well. The two got along very well as they were both brought up to respect the light and to take wonderful care of the lighthouse and the properties. Henry's stepson, Jerry, has made a few trips back from his home in Tennessee to share his memories of growing up at the light. He remembers the mirror and the tree at Big Sable, as was mentioned before. He said Henry had rigged up a similar mirror at Little Sable, so that was nothing new to him when he got to Big Sable. He lived at Big Sable until he left for college at Michigan Tech in 1960. Jerry's mother, Pinky, also left a lasting impression on the residents of Ludington. You see, many still remember her as the waitress or bartender at one of the local bars in town, sometimes filling in for the bouncer when things got rough at the bar. Locals claim that she could outfish any commercial fisherman. On Jerry's last visit to Big Sable, he brought me Pinky's scrapbook, and in the scrapbook were 2 of Pinky's commercial fishing licenses in it. Henry passed away in 1976, and there are several stories of Henry making an appearance around Big Sable Lighthouse since it's been taken over by the Sable Point Lighthouse keepers. Keepers have reported smelling cigar smoke in the lighthouse where no smoking is allowed. And we all know that Henry loved a good cigar. Lights seem to turn on overnight, especially in the light case, which showcases Henry's uniform. It seems that our volunteers, who refer to him as Hank, seem to experience strange things, like the fire alarm going off in the middle of the night when everyone else is asleep, or just the small little practical jokes, moving items around in your room, or hiding your items in someone else's room. Jerry said he wouldn't put it past his stepfather to be the one behind these happenings. He said he always wanted to be called Henry and not Hank, and his stepfather loved to pull pranks and have fun. As I told you, several concerned citizens of Ludington formed the Big Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association in 1987 to help save the tower from Lake Michigan. They worked in conjunction with the foundation to save the tower and the keepers' quarters. And once again in 1990, the foundation decided to pull out, but encouraged the group to become a nonprofit and to continue its effort to save the wonderful landmark. Now known as the Sable Point Lighthouse Keepers Association, we were the first nonprofit group to negotiate with the Coast Guard and then with the state of Michigan to manage a lighthouse in Michigan. All the other state-owned lighthouses that are leased from the state and managed by nonprofits have their leases based off our initial lease with the state. Knowing that there is a love of lighthouses by many people and their desire to stay in them for a short period of time, SPLKA started a volunteer keeper program. And once the residence was ready for occupancy, it was determined to let 3 families stay there at the light. Each family would take a month, and then they could open up the light at certain times during the day to let people in and show them what SPLKA had accomplished and what they were working on to accomplish for the preservation of the lighthouse. After 2 years of this, there was a waiting list of people wanting to live at the lighthouse. So it was determined to open the lighthouse up so that the 2 families could stay at the same time. And a gift shop was open to help support the light. The 2 families would stay only 2 weeks at a time, giving more people a chance to live and experience life at the lighthouse. Several years went by, and in the early 2000s, SPLKA hired our first executive director, Mary James. Mary's responsible for our wonderful keeper program that we have today. She organized it, and today we have over 220 volunteers that come in for a 2-week stay at Big Sable Point Lighthouse, with 200 other volunteers coming in to stay at our other lighthouses. We train the keepers, making sure that everyone knows what we're working on for preservation, how we're promoting it, and enlighten our keepers about the history of the light so that the volunteer keepers are able to educate those who visit the light. So we also, as I told you, we also have the Little Sable Point Lighthouse down in Silver Lake. And here are just a couple of historic pictures of that. You can see that it was red and then it was painted white so that the sailors could see it against the trees. You don't see a lot of trees there, but apparently there were a lot of trees there, and it was painted white until 1977 when the Coast Guard realized that they could sandblast it and put it back to red, and they didn't have to whitewash it every year. So, and there it is back to its red tower. So we also, in 2007, took over when the city of Ludington received the Ludington North Breakwater Lighthouse from the government. We took over the operation of the Ludington North Breakwater Lighthouse. So, and here are a couple of historic pictures here as well. The Fresnel lens out of the lighthouse that was taken out in 1994 and on display at the Maritime Museum. And of course, one of our great winter pictures of the lighthouse here. And the picture of all pictures, of course, the Badger with the lighthouse as the Badger's leaving for an evening cruise. We also have the White River Light Station, and in 2012, SPLKA took over the operation from Fruitland Township of the White River Light Station and Museum. This was built in 1875, and see some of the historic pictures. A picture from the tower. It's a harbor light, so it doesn't sit right out on the lake. It sits between Lake Michigan and White Lake, and on the channel. So. And this is Frances Johnson. She just happened to be the last woman lighthouse keeper in Michigan. She kept the light at the White River Light Station from 1949 to 1954. And she even stumped the panel on What's My Line in 1956, going on the panel. And she won a trip to New York and a whole $50. So from the program. Hopefully I've piqued your interest in our volunteer keeper program a little bit. And I just want to take a few minutes just to tell you about it. To be a volunteer requires that you become a member of the SPLKA nonprofit. Volunteer tours are 2-week commitments at Big Sable Point Lighthouse and 1-week commitments at the Ludington North Breakwater Light or the Little Sable Point Lighthouse. At Big Sable, you live upstairs in the keeper's quarters in a 4-bedroom, 2 living area, 2 full baths, and a common kitchen. Big Sable runs with between 5 and 8 keepers on duty for each 2-week tour. Volunteers man the gift shop, show the educational video, meet guests at the top of the tower during our open hours at 10 to 5. Off-duty chores consist of sweeping sand and blowing sand off the sidewalks, taking care of the outhouses, making sure the garbage is taken care of. And the volunteer experience at Little Sable and the North Breakwater is very similar. Those lighthouses run with 4 to 6 people per 1-week shift. And we have a nice 3-bedroom home with 2 full baths and wonderful living spaces for our keepers to stay in there as well. Once again, the light after hours duties, Little Sable includes blowing and sweeping sand, and at the Ludington Breakwater, restocking the gift shop. Here's the gift shop at the Little Point Sable Tower. And here's the gift shop inside the Ludington Breakwater. It's where you restock the gift shop in the base of the tower. Wonderful friendships are made as you serve the lights and live in community. Most of all, you're there to have fun and experience our wonderful guests and make their visit a memorable one. To be a keeper, you need to apply, and applications are on our website. They started in the middle of October. We still do have a few openings at Big Sable, and we have some openings as well at the Breakwater Light and Little Sable as well. All our new keepers are interviewed on Zoom now or by phone. And new keepers are also required to fill out information for a background check. We also have some day keeper opportunities available. And these are at the Little Sable, the Ludington North Breakwater, and White River. And they're very important because it gives our keepers who come in from out of the area a half a day or a full day off. And so it's really pretty nice to do that. They come in and give a whole week of their time. We hopefully give them a day off so that they can see the area that they've been up here visiting. So you can contact our office. You can go to our website, www.splka.org, and find out more about the Volunteer Keeper Program. So what's happening today with SPLKA? In 2018, SPLKA was awarded the Governor's Award for Historic Preservation of 4 Michigan's iconic lighthouses. And it was an honor for me to accept this down in Lansing and have our group recognized for all the wonderful preservation work that we've been able to accomplish. We're in the middle of a fundraising campaign that will help repair the 139 holes that are rusting in the Big Sable Point Tower. And part of the campaign is also to fund a historic structures report, which is an architectural report, which kind of maps out the whole station for us so we can see where all the different buildings were built and that type of thing. It's a pretty extensive report for the Big Sable Point Lighthouse grounds as well. We've raised $195,000 toward our $225,000 goal, and we're hoping with some grant that we have out there, grant requests that we have out there, that we'll be able to fund that and start on some of these projects this year. And these are items that have to be done and we need to have done to continue our wonderful preservation efforts. We also have some new educational material that's accessible on our website, including historical videos of our lights, a virtual video tour of both Big Sable and Little Sable, and an escape room of the Big Sable Lighthouse game. Now, to play that game, you really do need to do the Big Sable virtual tour or you'll never get out. As evidence of the first director I mentioned, Mary James, who called me one day and said, for 6 weeks, I have been stuck in the virtual room of the Big Sable Point Lighthouse game. And for the love of me, I can't get out of this because I can't answer the questions correctly. And I kind of laughed and said, well, did you do the virtual tour? And she said, no, I didn't do that. And I said, well, if you would have done that, you would have known all the answers to the questions, Mary James. As far as I know, she's still stuck there. So trying to get out. So our website's very easy to remember. As I said, it's www.SPLKA.org. And I invite everybody to check this out. I believe the nicest compliments I get are, and the ones that I cherish the most are from those who had visited our lights when they were closed or run down, or by those family members who visit our lights year after year. They are always amazed at the wonderful care that SPLKA has shown these structures, and they are so excited that we are preserving history for future generations. Hey, I want to thank the Friends of the Ludington State Park for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope I've conveyed some of my enthusiasm for the preservation of these wonderful, iconic lighthouses.
Peter, thank you for the excellent presentation. Do you think maybe Hank has the former executive director stuck in that virtual room?
Yes, right. He does. Yep. And Hank won't let her out.
When you mentioned the 400 plus volunteers, are any of them descendants of some of the lighthouse keepers that were in residence back, generations ago?
There have been. There are not currently. Well, I said that they're not currently, but we just ran an article on Frederick Samuelson, who was a keeper. It was in our recent newsletter. He was a keeper at the Lighthouse North Breakwater, and I found out that one of the keepers that serves at the Lighthouse North Breakwater is a great niece, and so she was really excited because her family's been looking for a whole bunch of information, had been unable to find it on her great uncle, and we had I think we had almost 12 pages of information on him in our last newsletter. So
it was a great article.
Thank you.
Kristen Wheeler's wondering, Peter, if you had to pick one favorite lighthouse, which one would it be?
Oh, I can't do that. Come on now. I have so many good memories, but just as an aside, Little Sable.
Can you give the attendees tonight some sense of how many individuals climb the various towers on any given year? I just find it fascinating in terms of how many visitors SPLKA hosts at these lighthouses, how many come out, and having been a volunteer now at 3 of the 4 lights, it's always so rewarding to have families come out and talk in terms of, I remember, being here when I was 5, and
sure.
And so it's generational for sure in terms of those that have enjoyed SPLKA's opening these lights up.
Yeah, overall, we have about 60,000 visitors for our four lighthouses. Our biggest one being Little Sable, where we usually have about right around 26 to 30,000 visitors a year. And Big Sable, we have approximately about 20,000 visitors. Yep.
Someone is asking for their 4-year-old son watching with them, how many stairs to the top? And then the mom's question is there a certain age or height restriction?
The height restriction is 40 inches tall. So I'm sure if he's 4 years old, he's 40 inches. There's 130 steps to the top of both the Big Sable and the Little Sable towers.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things you didn't mention that I've always, when I volunteer at the different lights and so forth, is the walkways and your fundraiser in terms of, because that is extremely meaningful for people to be able to leave their name at the Sable Lighthouse. You want to just comment on that opportunity in terms of giving?
Sure. We have a boardwalk that goes around the Big Sable Point Lighthouse, and we also have some boardwalk over at Little Sable in front of the gift shop. And you're able to buy a walkway board for $100. And for that $100, you can have 2 lines of engraving on those boards. And you get 25 characters per line. And as you said, Pat, we get a lot of people that come out, and they come out specifically because they want to see their walkway board out there. The form is on our website under our giving tab, and so you can go under that and or donation tab, and you can go under that and fill out the form and send it in with $100, and it will be engraved. This is a good time of year to do it, because if you do it this time of year, we'll have it out by May when we open Big Sable Point Lighthouse. So.
And again, if you know individuals that are visiting and have issues with mobility and are not able to attend on one of the bus days, I mean, there's the 6 bus days that are scheduled, and I know you have them out on your Facebook page and probably the website as well. But if somebody's not able to join or come out, rather, to enjoy the lighthouse on one of the bus days, again, we will have on the Ludington State Park website the ability for you to reserve the track chair and ride out in the track chair, and hopefully make some memories with family members.
And we are so excited about that, because we get probably 3 or 4 wheelchairs that get stuck a year out there. So that people want to, push someone out in a wheelchair. So
yes, yeah, definitely. So you have a lot of comments, Peter, thanking you for tonight's presentation. There's comments from individual from that's down in New Orleans.
I bet it's Kristen.
Yeah. She said she's excited to visit again this summer and miss the lights and her home state. But there are others as well. An individual commented from Ohio, from MacArthur, Ohio, thanking for the presentation and hoping to be able to visit this summer. So
super.
There's lots of people around that have enjoyed it. And for those of you that joined us this evening, you'll be getting an email hopefully by the end of the week. Again, we have recorded this. We'll be making the recording available on the Friends of Ludington State Park website. And so if you have family members or friends that would enjoy hearing Peter's presentation, there'll still be an opportunity to do so. So again, Peter, I'll wrap up because it is a few minutes after 8.
Sure, yeah.
Any last words?
Nope. Just, we're looking forward to a 2022 season, and we're going to be open in operation. And I said, once again, if you're looking for a volunteer keeper opportunity, contact us as soon as possible, because we still have some available. So,
and you probably still have day keepers available for.
Oh, we have lots of day keepers positions available. So so if you're local and you want to be a day keeper, please let us know. We'd love to have you. So
it's a great opportunity. I've done it for a number of years now. So again, thank you, and thank you all for joining us. And hopefully, if you're in the Ludington area this weekend, on Saturday is the Friends of the Ludington State Park largest fundraiser. which is Brewfest. And so we'll be at Legacy Plaza from 1 to 6 p.m. with the Chamber of Commerce, Pure Ludington, and celebrating in terms of being able to have a return to having a Brewfest. And those funds all go to the Friends of the Ludington State Park for improvements at the state park. So hopefully we'll see some of you this weekend at Brewfest.
Good.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Peter.
Thank you.